Okay, welcome to the PBL, MYP, and PYP webinar. We're excited to have you here. Thank you for taking time out of your day and your schedules to join us. My name is Jill Akers. I am a member of the Buck Institute for Education National Faculty, and we are going to present on our webinar about IB today for about 45 minutes. I'll go ahead and share some information for about 35 minutes, and then we'll have 10 minutes at the end for questions and answers. You can go ahead and post questions at any time in the Q&A below, and we do have a small enough group we could probably stop and answer those as we go through and get those questions. So our webinar will also be archived on the BIE website if you want to go back and look at some of the examples that we show. We would love for you to be able to share that out also with people who might be interested at a later time. So without any further ado, let's get to our driving question for the next 45 minutes. How can PBL complement IB to make school look more like real life? So we've seen tweets, journals, education organizations. We're all trying to decide the best way to educate our students and prepare them for the 21st century. And so today we're going to talk about how PBL can complement the amazing IB program and help bring some of our summative assessments and performance assessment tasks to real life. So let's look at our need to knows for the day. First, we're going to talk, or for the 45 minutes, how do the 8 essential elements of PBL fit within the PYP and MYP frameworks? How does PBL allow students to authentically connect their work to the real world? And how can I plan the 8 essential elements of PBL into PYP and MYP unit planners? We know that schools using the International Baccalaureate program often find PBL to be a perfect fit. So that's why we designed this webinar to help explore that and make some of those connections so as people plan their and work through their unit planners, they can see how PBL will help bring authenticity to some of those summative assessment tasks, as well as supporting the personal project and exhibition. So with that, we're going to begin by looking at the 8 essential elements of project-based learning. We know that the MYP and the PYP are both three-dimensional models that focus on concepts, principles, and generalizations using related facts and skills as tools to gain deeper understanding of disciplinary content through disciplinary themes in the PYP, or transdisciplinary themes in the PYP, and interdisciplinary issues, all to help facilitate conceptual transfer through time, across real life, problem solving, and service learning for our students. PBL is also a conceptual framework, and we find that PBL summative assessment tasks, which are designed to answer real-world questions and solve real-world problems, help fit in with the transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary issues and problem solving that are needed in our MYP and PYP unit planners. So with that, we're going to talk through the 8 essential elements of PBL and make connections to both PYP and MYP. The first essential element in PBL is significant content, setting goals for student learning that are explicitly derived from content standards and key concepts, which are at the heart of academic disciplines. So we know that all projects, all of our work is grounded and born from the significant content and the concepts that we want our students to walk away with. So if we look at PBL and what we've just talked about, if we look at PYP, we know that the deep conceptual understanding is the outcome, looking at essential knowledge, skills, and development of that understanding so our students can take responsible action. And we know that in the MYP, there's an understanding of those concepts. Again, skills, attitude, and knowledge to take that learning deeper so that our kids and students develop a genuine understanding of those ideas. Are there any questions so far? All right, well then we will keep going. Great. Our next PBL essential element is for 21st century skills. BIE has identified 4 21st century skills based on current research. We think that communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity are at the heart of 21st century skills. And we know that when we look at IB in general, the learner profile, which is the IB's mission statement translated into our outcomes for the 21st century, that we want our students to be inquirers, thinkers, knowledgeable, communicators, principled, open-minded, caring, risk-takers, balanced, and reflective. And so how do we bring problem solving and critical thinking into everything that our students do? What does that look like for our students on a daily basis? Because we know that the 4 C's are our students' ticket to academic success. And when they go into the real world, success with all their 21st century skills. There was a great article by the chair of the board of IB governors, and when asked about 21st century skills for IB teachers, her comment was, well, how do teachers balance content with 21st century creative thinking skills? And she said teachers and students need a reasonable balance, heavy on life skills. For example, she says, you go to law school not to learn a particular case, but how to think about cases. So our capacity for critical thinking is vital, and how to apply that to problem solving, how to communicate with our team members for creativity and innovation and to solve the problems that are out there. Our next essential element is in-depth inquiry. We know that in-depth inquiry is the collaborative process of connecting to and reaching beyond students' current understandings to explore real-world and significant issues that are not only relevant to the real world, but relevant to our students. Inquiry is a stance that combines uncertainty and invitation. This was a great article on Global Engage. A feeling of uncertainty encourages us to wonder and question, to move beyond current understandings, to pursue new possibilities. Without invitation, however, we may not feel safety in taking risks to pursue those possibilities by thinking with others. So how does the IB look at in-depth inquiry the way that PBL does? We know that at the heart of PYP, the major concepts are learned through structured inquiry, the 6 organizing themes that help teachers and children explore knowledge in an in-depth way. And through the IB, the areas of interaction are at the heart of inquiry, active learning, encouraging students to take action, and questioning, explaining, discovering, and by all means doing. Inquiry is truly going beyond information and experience to seek an explanation, to ask why, and to consider what if. And we know an expectation of the PYP and MYP, and if we don't know, it is an expectation of the IB that successful inquiry leads to meaningful reflection and responsible action initiated by the students as a result of their in-depth inquiry. Our driving question. PBL projects are organized around an open-ended driving question. This focuses their work, students' work, and deepens their learning by framing important issues, debates, challenges, or problems. If we look at PYP, we know who we are, where we are in place and time, how we express ourselves, how the world works, how we organize ourselves, how we share the planet. Students respond to these questions and challenges, I shouldn't have even put or, but and challenges, through in-depth inquiry. This is the school's program of inquiry. It's 6 units that last all year long, where the students take a deep dive into what does it mean to connect to real life. In the IB, as stated right out of Principles in Practice, a unit will be guided and driven by a question that integrates significant concepts and subject matter with context provided by one of the areas of interaction. It's a way for students to connect to the real world. need to know. Project-based learning reverses the order in which information and concepts are traditionally presented. A project-based learning unit begins with the vision of an end product or a presentation. So if we look at PYP and make these comparisons, we know that central ideas and globally significant concepts, they're relevant to students in their culture and in their context. So we want to offer students the opportunity to explore commonalities of human experience, relevant, real life, things that our students need to know. And in the MYP, using the areas of interaction to connect not only subjects interdisciplinary, but ways that humans can solve problems in multiple areas looking at those subjects. Next is voice and choice. Students learn to work independently and take responsibility when they're asked to make choices. So in PBL, we want to honor the students and invite them into their learning process, because learning is for them. We help guide them through that. It's their opportunity to make choices, express learning in their own voice, and it helps increase their engagement. And if we look at PYP, their inquiry cycle, students learn to choose, to act, to reflect on their own actions so that they can contribute to their own well-being and that of the community and the environment on a larger scale. And same with the MYP, the middle years program. Students learn to choose, act, and reflect on their actions so again they can contribute to the well-being and that of their community environment. So it's an authentic way to invite students into the relevance of the real world, not only just what's happening in the real world of their everyday classrooms, but beyond, locally, in their community, and globally. How are we setting them up for success to look beyond? Revision and reflection, our next essential element. We want students to learn to give and receive feedback in order to improve the quality of the products they create, and we ask them to think about what and how they're learning. So the essential element of revision and reflection helps inform them of their learning, where they need to go to develop a better product, provide a stronger argument, build those critical thinking skills that are so important in today's 21st century world and workforce. So when we think about revision and reflection and we look at the IB primary years program, one of their key concepts is understanding that there are different ways of knowing and reflecting on conclusions and considering their methods of reasoning and the quality and reliability of the evidence they've considered. So reflection is also a major part of critical thinking. Where am I? How have I drawn these conclusions? The conclusions I've drawn, what will their impact be? How do I know I'm impacting my audience in the right way, in the way that's beneficial for everybody? In the middle years program, students develop their skills through ongoing reflection continuously. It helps build and drive their inquiry process to again inform their learning. The next essential element of PBL is public audience. Students present their work to other people beyond their classmates and their teacher, in person and online. It ups the stakes. It increases student motivation. It provides authenticity, because in the real world, in our jobs and in our daily lives, we create products, whether they're thoughts, whether they're marketing materials, to make an impact, and we present those. So public audience, for example, the exhibition, it represents a significant event in the life of both the school and student. It synthesizes essential elements of the program where students share their work and their learning with the whole community. So public audience, not only in school, but providing real experience that students can use and take with them starting in the primary years program. Then in the middle years program, we have the personal project, where students take a personal piece that's personal to them, a significant piece of work. It's their initiative, and they, through their own creativity, present and their work is assessed by a larger public audience. So it's project-based learning at its heart through the exhibition in PYP and the personal project in MYP. So as we think about the essential elements of PBL, and we think about the IB primary years program and the IB middle years program, what are some of the things that we can take away from the first 10 minutes? All right, raise your hand if what we've talked about so far squares with your understanding of PYP, MYP, and PBL. So if you're still with us, go ahead and raise your hand if you're squared away and you feel like you're understanding of the 8 essential elements. Good, I see a hand raised. Way to go. Good, good. A little metacognitive moment for us so we can interact together. Did you find 3 important points that you connected to the most? If so, maybe you could post one of those points in our chat section. If you still have some questions circling around in your head based on the 8 essential elements, put one of those questions in our question and answer section. That way at the end we can get back to those. Great, Peggy. Love that it's important for students to have choices within the units of study. Absolutely. Absolutely. Voice and choice really supports engagement, creativity, and buy-in from not only our students, but from us. Absolutely. Passion, engagement do come from choices. Great. All right. Great formative assessment tool. What are we squared away with? What 3 points? What are some of the things still circling around in our head? With that, if there are no questions for now, we're going to move forward to our next need to know. Well, let's go back. How do you deal with weak students who are not engaged in a project? That's a great question. I would love to hit that at the end when we look at some of our examples. And if you'll post that in our question and answer section, that would be excellent. And we will get to that. We can provide some resources that you can go and look at afterwards. So we did touch on, and I actually might put that into, how do you deal with weak students who are not engaged in a project? So I'm going to add that to our question and answer section. So let's go back to our need to know. How does PBL allow students to authentically connect their work to the real world? So if we take a look, we're going to start with PYP because we're going to start there with their inquiry-based cycle, which is reflect, choose, and act. And I think some of these items might help with our question about students who aren't engaged. So when we think about reflection and choosing and action, we talk about the inquiry process in developing a unit of inquiry, giving students voice and choice to choose what action they want to take, what problems, what issues are out there that they're interested in. How can they choose a topic and we connect our units to the relevancy, the things that our students are interested in. We know in project-based learning that students respond to a complex question, problem, or challenge. So we can ensure action and engagement for students, by providing them voice and choice, by providing them opportunities to look at action in multiple ways. Let's go ahead and look at an example. Here's a school from China, PYP grade 4, net games. This school, their 3rd grade students were having not issues, but they were challenged by their PE program. And so The fourth grade was asked to help put together the third grade PE program, the games that they would play. So their question, how do we teach each other and play together? Their challenge was to create a net game, meaning a game that had a net, like volleyball or badminton. They were to create a net game for their third grade classmates. They were to include directions, length of play, and the health benefits of that game. The game had specific criteria. It had to include maximum participation, have specific rules. So they also had to have some type of strategy in order for the game to be successful. So the elements of PBL in a PYP summative assessment task. Our driving question, one of our 8 essential elements of PBL included. Here's our challenge, our project idea, what our students were going to be working on. Here's another example of a PYP project. Here's our transdisciplinary theme, how do we express ourselves? An inquiry into the ways in which we discover, express ideas, feelings, nature. Their central idea, people convey culture through music and dance. How do we welcome the world to our world? The driving question for their summative assessment task. Here are the products that our students will deliver. They're going to be composing lyrics or music or choreographing a dance. They'll also construct welcome speeches. They'll deliver these to a public audience. The Universal Declaration on Cultural Diversity is visiting their school. So their products are beyond the 4 walls of their classroom, but they're actually being used and presented. They have relevance and meaning to what they're working on. So let's take a moment and look at the NYP process. Their circle or the cycle of inquiry again begins with awareness and understanding. What issues are there, what significant concepts are they going to be looking at so that they can then take action on things that they're becoming aware of, the significant concepts, not just the standards in the content, but the significant concepts in the real world that are relevant to them. And once they take action, they can reflect on the products and the projects that they've created and developed and how it's changed their learning along the way. So this reflection piece not only goes throughout the life of a project, but at the end. How did the project impact who they are as a person? And that's what IB is aiming for, whether it's in the PYP, MYP, or DP. How a project and the work that students do impacts them and grows them. In today's information society, what are they doing with that information? Let's take a look at an MYP design challenge. How can we design for dual form and function? A driving question included. This is a summative assessment task for an 8th grade technology course. So as product engineers, they're designing a briefcase chair and a group design report. They've been given a role, a real-life role that they can then look through the lens of not only the issue of why you would need this dual form and function briefcase chair, but what it means to be a product engineer, adding authenticity to not only their product, but how their product will be used in the real world. We've got revision and reflection through the use of a project design rubric. Throughout the life of the project, not just at the end, they're using a performance task rubric. Just like you would in MYP, it would happen in PBL. This is revision and reflection. How can we use these tools all the way through a project? The same way we would in PBL and IB, they complement each other, therefore making projects and taking them to a more authentic place. Product engineers, that role, giving their summative assessment task that real authentic role. Here are two more examples through the MYP process. So we've looked at various subjects. We've looked at PE in an interdisciplinary fashion, how it also looks at health and wellness, the choices that students make, bringing in the areas of interaction, as well as the PYP transdisciplinary themes. So here are two examples from years 4 and 5, geography and math. Students are designing and proposing a bike path for a community area, and they're going to submit that proposal to a local planning agency. So their public audience is so relevant. It takes the depth of their project to a new level because they can bring in experts to help them learn and grow through the project and then actually see projects come to fruition. Another one, create a calendar to be sold to raise money for the 8th grade dance. Very relevant in the NYP developmental process, how students can do something that will benefit themselves. Developmentally, that's very appropriate for 8th grade. So we've looked at how do the 8 essential elements of PBL fit within the PYP and MYP frameworks. How does PBL allow students to authentically connect their work to the real world? How can I plan the 8 essential elements of PBL into PYP and MYP unit planners? So let's take the first two need-to-knows and look at how we get traction. We've talked about the why, and let's look at the what and the how into our daily planning as teachers. And then also as leaders, how do we develop a culture of bringing in the 8 essential elements of PBL into a PBL campus? What is it, or into an IB campus? What does it look like to develop authentic projects that are really being used and they're not just assessment tasks, summative assessment tasks? So we're going to begin with the BIE project overview form. And these are our planning forms that would align to the IB, PYP, and MYP planning forms. So we also have a project teaching and learning guide. So if we were to go back, our project overview form would be steps 1 through 3 on the PYP planner, and it would be stage 1 for the MYP planner. Our teaching and learning guide would be steps 4 and 5, possibly some of 3 in the PYP planner. And if you understand the primary years unit planner template and the MYP middle years unit planner template, this makes much more sense. And we'll go through some examples in a minute. And this is stage 2 in our MYP planner. So let's take a look at first our PYP planner. Before we move on, are there any questions at this point? Anyone want to make a comment of what we've looked at as far as authenticity? All right, then we're just going to keep moving along. Okay, PYP planner and the BIE project overview form. So if we look at step 1 in a PYP planner, what is our purpose? For example, transdisciplinary theme, sharing the planet. We're looking at an inquiry into rights and responsibilities in the struggle to share finite resources on our planet. If we take a look at the project idea on the BIE form, a summary of the issue, the challenge, or the investigation, a driving question, our content standards, those are aligned with what is our purpose, what is our central idea around this challenge. Let's look at a project idea sample. In Central America, they're expanding the Panama Canal. By excavating the new canal, there are concerns that lakes and rivers are being polluted with increased sediment, decreased flow, and rerouting of water flows. Students are being asked to create a presentation for various audiences around the world to explain those impacts. Their driving question, what impact does this mega project have on water quality of local and agricultural communities? This is about how we organize ourselves, how government systems and decisions can promote or deny equal opportunities and social justice. So here is the PBL project idea connected to a PYP unit of inquiry with a driving question, with a public audience, and with a project idea that's challenging for students. Gives them a need to know. There's summative assessment tasks. What are the possible ways of assessing students' understanding of that central idea? What evidence will we be looking for? What student-initiated actions will we look for? Here we've got revision and reflection. We have student voice and choice around development of authentic products that will help make their world a better place. Content standards. What do we want to learn? What are the key concepts? So if we look at PYP, form, function, causation, change, connection, perspective, responsibility, and reflection to be emphasized within this inquiry. So as we look at the content standards to be taught and assessed, how are we assessing? Is it through reflection? Is it through how our students are developing their perspective, looking at the changes that they can be made within that unit of inquiry? How might we best learn our 21st century skills? Here's where the learner profile is utilized and where we're growing our students and we're developing their skills as inquirers, as thinkers, as communicators. All of those IB learner profile traits, we're growing them because they don't come to us with those fully developed. Our job is over time and vertically articulated, giving them those skills that they need to grow to ultimately become a 21st century contributor to our world. How might we know what we've learned? Section 3 on the PYP planner. What are the possible ways of assessing students' prior knowledge and skills? What evidence will we look for? So how will we use formative assessments to help grow and develop the products that our students are creating for an authentic audience? How will we know they're building their skills around collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity? Again, when looking at our PYP planner, how does it fit within PBL? What are the learning experiences suggested by the teacher and or the students, inviting the students into their own learning process, honoring that this learning is for them as well as for us. As teacher and as student, we're all learning side by side. And that's what the IB is about, is everyone growing in a lifelong learning environment and developing and honoring that passion in everyone. Encouraging students to engage with those inquiries and addressing the driving questions. How can we take a student who's not engaged in a product or in a project and invite them in? Ask them. How do we look at students and honor what they're interested in? What voice and choice can we give students so that they are engaged? Can they look at a unit of inquiry in a different way based on where they're coming from? How do we meet them where they are to promote engagement for what's truly relevant to that student or to students? That's the heart of PBL. Looking at the relevance, the real world relevance, student relevance, and building conceptual understanding. What are our resources? What experts can we bring into the classroom all the way through a PYP unit of inquiry or a project-based learning unit? Because they're all culminating in an authentic experience, an authentic presentation that's delivered to a public audience. So who can we bring in along the way? What related reading materials, art, what technology are we going to use? What transparent tools are we going to put in our students' hands to develop a higher quality product? And how are we going to use reflection methods to continue to elicit higher quality products from our students all the way through that project? So as we think of the last questions that we go through as teachers in a PYP unit planner, it's about teacher reflection. How do we elicit higher quality units of inquiry from ourselves? So let's take a moment ourselves to reflect on what we just went through for the PYP planner. To what extent did we achieve our purpose at looking at how PYP, and PBL complement each other in the planner? Raise your hand if you feel like you have a better understanding of how the two planners can work together and function together. Good, that's excellent. Did we include the elements of PYP that you were hoping to see? Go ahead and give some applause instead of raising your hands. Good. Are there any notes, any reflections, or questions that you want to add to the chat, or a question that you want to post for a few minutes when we get to our question and answer section? So if you want, go ahead and post in the chat or post a question. All right, then we're going to go ahead and move into MYP, the MYP unit planner. Just as PYP, the MYP unit planner is based on authentic summative tasks that are relevant to student learning. The MYP unit planner begins with significant concepts. These are those big ideas that we want our kids to remember 5 years down the road. We don't want them to remember the name of the battle on the field of War of 1812, but what are the concepts, the big ideas that we wanted them to walk away with because they understood why that battle occurred? And then once we develop our significant concepts based on our content, what area of interaction are we going to focus on? What authentic, real-world elements are we going to connect for our students? What lens are we going to have them look at the IB experience, the MYP experience through? Because those culminate in an assessment, a specific assessment that's based on the MYP unit question. Oops, our little red circle should be up a little bit further. But our MYP unit question is born out of our area of interaction and significant concepts. And your students' assessment should allow them to answer that question in a deep and meaningful way that's authentic to the real world, or a scenario of a solution, a scenario of a problem where they find a solution that would actually could be implemented in the real world. That unit question drives the entire MYP unit. That unit of inquiry is delivered through that question. It's used in your classroom on a daily basis to help redirect student understanding, or to help engage in certain activities that will deepen your students' understanding around your significant concepts. So in PYP and MYP, your driving question, it's posted in your room. Students are unpacking that through the development of products, whether they're in the form of presentation, three-dimensional products that they're going to be presenting in front of a public audience, the development of a thought, the evolution of their thinking as they become thinkers in this 21st century environment and culture that you're creating in your classroom. So now let's look at how the MYP planner fits within the BIE project overview forms. So our project idea, summary of the issue and challenge, those are our significant concepts and our areas of interaction blended together to help us develop an MYP summative assessment task. because those will culminate in your MYP unit question, your driving question. It's what builds inquiry in your students. Why would they want to answer this question? Why would they want to unpack this question and create a solution that they want to share with other kids in their classrooms, and how they could make the world a better place by answering this question? Here's an example of stage 1. This is an exemplar unit that is off of the IB OCC, the Online Curriculum Center, that you can find on the International Baccalaureate website. So if you're part of an IB school, you should have access. This is an exemplar unit taken from the NYP OCC and PBLized. So our significant concepts. Some measures of development can be described with numbers while others can't. There are many reasons why development is uneven or unfair. Rapid development has winners or losers. So students will be looking through the lens of poverty and look at what the causes of poverty and how they can address, how they can, as a part of the same community, find responsibility in addressing a problem. Our driving question, can development benefit everyone? So they're looking at China and their agrarian populations, and they're looking at how part of China has become and using capitalistic practices in certain areas and not other areas. So they're taking a deep dive, an inquiry-based problem and challenge within a global issue, and they're going to make some decisions and solve some problems and present those to a larger body. Stage 2 would be, what does that look like on a daily basis? What learning experiences and teaching strategies am I going to use to help students unpack that driving question, to help provide solutions and take action? The ways that they choose to take action, that would be student voice and choice, looking at that PBL essential element. What way will students use 21st century skills in the MYP unit planner? They'll do that through the approaches to learning. As they look at real life content, how will they communicate and collaborate and think critically as they approach their learning? In what ways will they organize their thoughts and their presentations for their various audiences? And looking at which approaches to learning you as a teacher would want your students to focus on, knowing where they are and what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are. Project Teaching and Learning Guide, listing the student products, and then really unpacking what activities, what knowledge and skills my students will need to help them develop these products, and then what scaffolding materials will I need to provide to support them along the way through this process. All right, so as we wrap up our 45 minutes, raise your hand if this, again, squares with your understanding of PYP and MYP unit planning. But let's do an applause. You did a raise your hand last time. Good. Are there any interesting points that you want to post in the chat? Are there any questions circling around in your head? Let's take the next couple of minutes and talk about what things are still coming through as questions. Because we know that the IB views assessment as needing to be authentic and essential and rich, engaging, feasible, and where students are incorporated into the evaluative process. We know that PBL students are doing work that's real to them and authentic. That the work that they're doing has a direct impact on or use in the real world. IB and PBL complement each other through authenticity. So through IB and the development of summative assessment tasks, creating authentic tasks, having students develop authentic products that will be used in the real world, So we take those summative tasks to a deeper level. That brings that 21st century authenticity to the forefront. So how can PBL complement IB to make school look more like real life? So first, let's go to, are there any questions? Well, did get a note that says, did you see my questions in the Q&A? And I am not. Let me make sure. I'm looking at it. Oh my goodness, look at all these excellent questions. I'm so sorry I didn't see them. Thank you, Peggy, for posting 4 questions. I apologize. Okay, so let's get to, is everything driven by the teacher in these models, selecting unit focus, driving question, etc.? No, we would certainly want students to be involved and invited into the process of initiating their own PBL. And some things that we've done in class with our teachers, as an NYP coordinator for 6 years, as well as developing our campus's PYP Application A and Application B, one thing we always strive for with our teachers is put the significant content out for your students, or that transdisciplinary theme, and allow them to select the focus that they're interested. Absolutely. Please invite them into it. So another one, roughly how much time does it take a teacher to complete an entire template with all steps for a unit? Well, I think that depends, and great question. I think it depends on your level of experience. If I take a first year to NYP teacher, I would say it would probably take them 4 to 6 hours, but I would spread that out over a period of days or weeks. And also I ask, and we in PBL, we ask our teachers, put your work out there for reflection, get feedback from other teachers. So looking at a first year teacher, possibly a week. Experienced teachers, I have found that they can pull together PBL units and project ideas in a couple of hours, especially if they're getting those ideas from their students. So again, great question. So does the template address alignment with Common Core standards or only content standards? Absolutely, you could address alignment with Common Core standards. You could use the standards that are representative for what you're working with, but absolutely you would align them with Common Core standards. And there is already some deep alignment around critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity that are being developed within that. And I love Peggy's comment about, I think that students should be involved in helping develop the self-reflection criteria for assessing learning. Absolutely. I was talking about this just last night with another national faculty member about rubrics and how if you have a 4-column rubric, you give the at standard rubric, you fill that section out for them. But you allow your students to fill out what will it mean to go above and beyond standard? What will it mean to be below standard? And leaving that section blank so the students can be part of that process to help them build and figure out through revision and reflection how they're getting to at standard and above and beyond standard. So yes, alignment with Common Core, absolutely, as well as inviting them in. The key is experienced teachers for developing a unit, absolutely. Beginning teachers, as with undergrads, absolutely much longer than 2 hours, because they're still understanding how to move beyond a lesson plan, that point in time at that moment in the classroom, to really the big picture, what they want their students to walk away with over time, over a long period of time. So I think what we want to go back is, how do you deal with weak students who are not engaged in a project? I think that there's a lot of ebb and flow in this. So what management strategies, what teaming strategies, how did we honor student voice and choice in what they're working on. So management and developing an NYP culture or a PYP culture in your classroom would be, in my opinion and in my experience working in both PBL schools and IB schools, the first place that we start is, what does the culture of my classroom look like? What is it, the aesthetic that I'm setting for the students as they're experiencing learning at that point? That's where I would begin with weak students who are not engaged in a project. And then I would start by sitting down with them and having challenging and thought-provoking conversations and discussions, and build arguments with those students to get at the heart of what they're passionate about, and doing that through debate. So excellent question. And there are lots of resources on the BIE website, the Edutopia website. The IBOCC also has a lot of great resources in the teacher resource and the e-teacher sections about students who are not engaged in units of inquiry. Okay, do you put in writing the kinds of evidence you are looking for to assess student learning? That's a great question. I think absolutely you want to make everything transparent about what you're looking for, the kind of evidence that you want to see within the products that you're asking of your students. Transparency, transparency, transparency is the key for students, because through revision and reflection, we can then elicit higher quality products by assessing them all the way through the development of a product, whether it be a presentation, whether it be a persuasive essay that's meant to convince someone about an argument that maybe they were either for or against in the beginning and they've changed their mind. So absolutely, I would say yes, that you would want to put that the kinds of evidence that you want, as well as how you're going to assess that evidence, into writing, and be very transparent for students. How can you motivate them? Great, to engage in a long activity. I think one of the keys for motivation, whether it's in IB or PBL, is how you're establishing benchmarks and mapping up the project for students, how you're organizing tasks and activities on a daily basis, because again, it becomes part of that culture and the conditions that you construct within your classroom. So if students aren't motivated to engage in a long activity, how can we look at the planning that we've put into the PBL unit or the NYP or PYP unit of inquiry? How can we break things up? I've seen PBL unit plans that are as short as 2 weeks, whereas their next one would be 4 weeks. And I also think if you're looking at students, PBL supports differentiation really well, in the sense that you can scaffold, and projects aren't necessarily pulling students through the curriculum if they're designed well. They're actually engaged through the process if it's scaffolded and differentiated for where they are. So there are a lot of strategies and techniques and daily tasks and activities that you can use to support projects that have a longer time frame. And I think looking at those resources. So a 10-day product, and some students did not do much until the last day before the deadline. So I'm curious, as we look at what a typical unit, whether it be PBL or through the IB lens, what milestones and benchmarks did you have on day 2? So if you launch a project on day 1, do the students have to go through an initial goal setting process and do a brainstorming activity such as open, narrow, close, and then deliver a set of goals for what they're going to do the next 10 days? And their exit ticket are those sets of goals. And then maybe using tools, if your school utilizes homework, developing a set of personal goals for that 10-day project and having that personal piece be their homework. So again, I think as as we look at student motivation, it's about how we're dividing up the activities and the tasks, and then having check-ins, checkpoints along the way, and also looking at how we're dividing student labor within an activity. Are students not completing things within a certain time frame because maybe they didn't understand their role as a project manager? How are you utilizing job descriptions to help provide structure around completing those tasks? And then again, not giving too much structure for those who need a more open-ended way of completing a project, and using multiple intelligences, sample Myers-Briggs activities are ways that you can get to know your students and that they can get to know each other. So again, it goes back to that first point, is how do you build PBL or just culture within your class around what it means to develop and answer driving questions. The last thing we want them to do is get discouraged and give up. And so if we're really meeting those 3 elements at the heart of PBL, which is significant concepts, which are at the heart of MYP, and they're at the heart of PYP, significant concepts, real world relevance, and student relevance. You know, are we excited about the projects, but maybe they aren't really exciting for our students? How do we support them through the process? So, any more questions that I did not get to? Let me go through. So we got to that one. Is the unit question for MYP different than the driving question? No, absolutely not. I would say it's not. They both function in the same way that it helps drive student learning towards solving an issue, solving a problem, addressing an issue or a challenge. Because every unit question or driving question, students are going to unpack those through the development of products and presentations to help address that question at a very large scale. They have to address the significant concepts and the areas of interaction, the lens that they're looking through. So if we look at environments, you know, are students lead certification specialists? Are they looking through a job role to help provide relevance to looking through that lens of the area of interaction? So yes, MYP, unit question, and driving question, one and the same. All right, are there any other questions? Well, then I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and please provide feedback on the BIE site. We have a PBL page on Edmodo that there is a huge resource and support forum on Edmodo PBL. All of these items you can find answers, post questions, and get information. I'm on Edmodo. I'm also on Twitter, IB PBL Jill. Send me questions anytime. I've worked with IB and have brought schools to authorization for MYP as well as supported PYP teachers and trained both. So is there an Edmodo code for PBL? I'm sure there is, and I don't know it, but we can find out for you if you stay on after. But find us on PBL. Actually, all you have to do is look for the PBL group. This logo, you'll see it on the red PBL, because it's a public group, absolutely, and you can find that. And you'll find all of us on there anytime, and we love to answer questions. And I love to go through MYP unit plans, so send one, and PYP, units of inquiry, send them our way. But otherwise, thank you for helping us make our world a little bit of a better place through authentic learning experience.